The courtroom felt heavier than air. It pressed against the lungs of everyone inside, making each breath slow, deliberate, almost painful. No one spoke. Even the usual noise of shifting chairs and rustling papers had faded into an unnatural silence. All eyes were fixed on one man. Pete. At just 25 years old, he had become a name that carried weight across continents. Born in South Korea and rising through the shadows of organized power, he had built an empire in New York City that blurred the line between legality and dominance. He wasn't just a businessman. He was control. Entire corporations moved at his signal. Markets shifted when his investments changed direction. Behind closed doors, whispers of his influence stretched into places where laws no longer mattered. People didn't simply know him. They feared him. And yet, as he sat there in that courtroom, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that now felt strangely meaningless, he looked calm. Too calm. His dark eyes remained fixed forward, unreadable, as if none of this concerned him. But inside, something restless stirred. Because for the first time in years, things were uncertain. The judge cleared his throat. The sound echoed like a warning. Papers shuffled. Glasses adjusted. A pause stretched just long enough to make hearts race. Then the words came. The court finds against Mr. Piju. It was subtle at first. A slight tightening of his jaw. Barely noticeable. But inside, something snapped. All assets, businesses, and financial holdings are to be seized with immediate effect. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Then, explosion. Gasps. Whispers. A storm of reactions crashing into each other. Reporters leaned forward. Lawyers scrambled. Some faces showed shock. Others, satisfaction. Piju didn't move. Not immediately. He sat there, letting the words sink in, replaying them in his mind as if repeating them would somehow change them. But they didn't. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a strategy. This was the end. For the first time in his life, he had lost. Outside the courthouse, chaos waited. Cameras flashed relentlessly, their bright lights blinding as reporters shouted over each other. Piju, any comments? Is this the end of your empire? Were the allegations true? Security tried to push them back, but there was no control anymore. Not today. Piju stepped out into the storm of attention, his expression still composed, still unreadable. But there were no answers. No statements. No power left in silence. Within hours, everything changed. Bank accounts frozen. Properties seized. Companies locked under legal control. Phones stopped ringing. Messages stopped coming. People who once begged for his attention suddenly disappeared like they had never existed. The fall wasn't gradual. It was instant. That night, New York City looked different. The lights were still there. The noise, the movement, the endless energy, it hadn't changed. But for Piju, it felt distant, like he was no longer part of it. He walked alone through streets he once owned in every sense of a word. The penthouse he lived in was no longer his. His cars, his guards, his world, gone. For a while, he kept walking. No destination, no plan, just movement, as if stopping would force him to accept reality. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with him. He found a quiet spot near a closed building and sat down. Cold concrete beneath him. Silence around him. This is temporary, he whispered to himself. It had to be. Men like him didn't fall. They recovered. They rebuilt. They returned stronger. At least, that's what he believed. The next day came, and nothing changed. No calls. No solutions. No sudden reversal. Just hunger. At first, it was manageable. A dull discomfort. But as hours passed, it grew sharper. More demanding. By nightfall, it was all he could think about. He walked past restaurants, the smell of food hitting him like a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. For the first time in years, he had nothing. And hunger doesn't care about pride. It doesn't respect status. It doesn't negotiate. By the third day, he broke. Behind a restaurant, he found discarded food. He stared at it for a long time. Longer than he would ever admit. Then slowly, he reached for it. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. Time lost structure. Life became survival. Finding food. Finding shelter. Avoiding trouble. He learned quickly. Where to sleep. Where to avoid. How to stay invisible. Because that's what he had become. Invisible. People passed him without looking. Stepped around him like he was part of the street itself. Some glanced at him briefly. Most didn't care. The same city that once bowed to his presence now ignored his existence. His body changed. Thinner. weaker, his clothes worn, his appearance rough. But his eyes, they never changed. Still sharp, still deep, still carrying something powerful beneath the surface. Then came the night that changed everything. Rain poured heavily across the city. Cold, relentless. The kind of rain that soaked through everything, leaving no escape. Pichu sat outside a closed convenience store, his back against the wall, arms wrapped around himself for warmth. He didn't move, didn't try to find shelter, didn't try to fight it. He just sat there, letting it happen. Footsteps approached. He heard them before he saw them. Slow, steady. Then they stopped, right in front of him. He didn't look up at first, until a voice spoke. "Hey, you're going to get sick out here." Soft, gentle, unexpected. He lifted his head and saw her. Becky. Her face showed fatigue, the kind that comes from long hours and hard work. But her eyes, they were kind, concerned, real. "I'm fine," Pichu muttered. She tilted her head slightly. "No, you're not." There was no judgment in her voice, just truth. She looked at him for a moment longer, then sighed, and did something no one had done in months. She held out her hand. "Come with me." That single moment changed everything. Her home was small, but felt alive in a way he had almost forgotten. Warm light filled the space. The scent of cooked food lingered in the air. It wasn't luxury, but it was something far more rare. Comfort. She handed him a towel. Then clothes. Simple ones. Clean. Dry. "Go wash up," she said. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because it felt unfamiliar. Then slowly he nodded. When he came back, she had already prepared food. A simple meal. Rice. Stew. Vegetables. He sat down quietly. She watched him for a moment, then said softly, "You can eat." And he did. Not like a billionaire, not like a man of power, but like someone who had been starving. Because he had. That night, she gave him a place to sleep. A real bed. And for the first time in months, he slept deeply, peacefully, without fear. Morning came with laughter, voices, life. 2 young women entered the room, surprised to see him. Becky's daughters. One of them stood out immediately. Nyasha, 23 years old. Strong presence, sharp eyes, natural beauty that didn't rely on effort. "Who is he?" she asked. Becky smiled slightly. "Someone who needed help." Nyasha studied him carefully. Something about him felt different. Even in silence, he carried himself like someone who didn't belong to the streets. And she noticed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something more. Pichu didn't talk much, but he helped. Fixed things around the house. Cleaned. Stayed respectful. Stayed quiet. But Nyasha watched him. Closely. The way he moved. The way he thought before speaking. The way his eyes seemed to hold stories he never shared. "You're not who you say you are," she told him one evening. He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Maybe I'm just someone who lost everything." She didn't respond, but she didn't believe that was the full truth either. Their connection grew slowly, naturally. Late-night conversations turned into shared laughter. Shared silence turned into comfort. She saw the man behind the fall. He saw the warmth behind her strength. And without realizing it, they fell in love. Months later, a letter arrived. Everything changed again. Pichu opened it, read it, then read it again. His case had been reviewed, reversed, won. Everything was restored. And just like that, he was powerful again. But this time, power didn't feel the same. Because now, he had something real to lose. Pichu told Becky his plans, that he wanted to marry her daughter Nyasha, and Becky was happy that her daughter was going to marry by a humble man. But when Becky found out that Pichu was a billionaire, she refused. Not out of anger, but fear. "I don't want my daughter in that world," she said firmly. Pichu tried everything, but her answer never changed. So they made a choice. A dangerous one. To leave everything behind. Even the truth. Pichu and Nyasha faked Nyasha's death so that they could run away and start a different life. The night Nyasha died, Becky's world shattered. Her grief was real. Her pain, unbearable. But little did she know that the death was fake. Pichu and Nyasha went to Africa. In a country called Zimbabwe. They started their new life. A real life. They built something simple. Something honest. A home filled with laughter. Children. Love. Years passed. And Pichu realized something. He hadn't lost everything that day in court. He had lost what didn't matter, and found what truly did. Because sometimes, losing the world is the only way to find your life.